Google I/O 18 has finally happened. And by finally, I mean like kind of forgot it was happening. I read the news a lot and I still somehow forgot it was happening today. I just woke up and was like, oh yeah, that's a thing. But either way, Google gave us a lot of stuff to talk about, so without further ado, let's see what they have to offer. I've decided after watching a couple recap videos other people have done that there's really no way I can cover every single thing they talk about. They talk about how their new machine learning servers have been updated to this new TPU thing so that all of their really fast processors require liquid cooling, and I'm like, Google, if you like fast processors, why didn't you wait for the Snapdragon 845 and the Pixel 2? But anyhow, they talked about a lot of the new features coming in Android P. They talked about their ride-sharing service that involves self-driving cars, which is really interesting, with Waymo, as in you'll just get in the car and it'll start driving. They talked about this new do not disturb gesture where you can put your phone face down and that will automatically put it into do not disturb mode, which to me I was like, well, so that means that in order to keep getting messages and keep getting notifications on your Pixel, you're gonna have to keep the device face up with the display facing upwards, but the Touch ID sensor's on the back. So anytime you have to unlock it, you have to pick up the phone yourself. You can't just tap on it or look at it, something I can do with an iPhone 8 or 10, but plenty of Android users were excited about that. I'm happy for you. And they may as well start calling it Google AI. Oh, screw it. Let's just go A-E-I-O-U, just all the vowels. But what I mean by that is artificial intelligence is mentioned nearly in every chapter of this keynote. They're very passionate about it, and they really do believe that is the future in regards to anything you can imagine. We're gonna start placing orders for you with AI. We're gonna start taking pictures. We can bring new color to pictures that are black and white or just part of the picture with AI. Google Lens is gonna look at things and tell you what they are, and Google Maps is now gonna be using AI. But probably one of the coolest things they added with Google Maps is something called VPS. And using augmented reality, they're able to project the names of different stores when you're in a city looking down the street. It can tell you which store is where, which is interesting. Makes it a lot easier for people who may get turned around when they're looking for directions. They're not sure if they should open the compass or which way is north. This hopefully simplifies that. They even had a fox running around to show you where to go. Just keep following that fox, because what are we doing here? Anyway, very playful operating system. So pretty much absolutely no mention of hardware at this keynote, but I think that's normal now for Google I/O. I don't think last year we got any news of new hardware coming out either. I just remember a couple years back when they would unveil like smart speakers and different types of Google hardware, but I think they reserved that now for the Pixel event. And one of the most controversial things they talked about that a lot of people are bringing up is the introduction of gesture control, which looks pretty similar to another smartphone you may have heard of, shipped more units than everyone else, where you just swipe up and hold to go to multitasking. But to be fair, there is a stark difference. On the iPhone 10, you swipe up to go home. On Android P, you just press the button at the bottom to go home. It's not swipe up to go home. So pretty close design-wise, but not exactly. But I'm not mad about that. I'm not critiquing Google for that. They want to adopt people to a new future where there's less bezels, there's less room around the actual display of the device to have navigational controls. You want to be as minimal with that as possible, and maybe the future involves not having a multitasking home button and back button at all times. I was a bit confused when they talked about the volume control and how it defaults to media now, because they were like, we've all been in that situation, right, where you're playing some music and it's too loud so you want to turn it down, but it changes the ringer volume. And I was like, is that a common problem, or is that just something I'm used to on iOS? You know, when you start turning down the volume of whatever media is playing, it'll turn that down. I don't know. We've talked about in the past how Android P copies a lot of what iOS has had for a while, which is fine, by the way. They're all good features and I'm glad Android is getting them, but one of them that surprised me was the battery efficiency thing. So we're going to use certain apps in the background and put those to sleep because we know you don't need them as much to prolong your battery life, which iOS has done for a while, but also a lot of people are not okay with that, especially when you do those speed tests and you're showing off how fast an iPhone is versus a Pixel or versus a Galaxy. And the Galaxy phone on lap 2 can open things a lot faster because it wasn't closing them in the background. With Android P, it sounds like some of them will, and put the managing of those apps on slower CPUs, which again is something Apple's been doing for a while. But still, good on you, Google, for adopting things that make sense to try to make better battery lives. But another interesting part of the keynote was when they talked about Android Dashboard, which I think a lot of people are actually gonna like. That shows you throughout your day all the different times you unlock your device and what apps you use throughout the day, which leads to them talking about how you can turn your phone off more often by having apps get grayed out if you schedule them to, or in fact the whole operating system going to black and white to tell you to just get off your phone, which is interesting that they have to like design ways to make the operating system worse to remind you to get off of it. I don't know, it just sounded weird to me. But overall, I didn't mind too much of it because I realized that Google's very passionate about AI and machine learning. They want to bring people together. They want to be there for everyone, get answers to people faster, make the Google Assistant actually answer phone calls for you, which they demoed in the keynote, and it's kind of creepy how well it works, but it's just amazing to me how much time and how much awkwardness they're willing to put into just the process of making a reservation. Like, is that something that takes up a lot of people's time, just like calling someone and be like, hey, can I come in at 10? No? 11:15? Okay, I'll come in at 11:15, bye. That's too much! We have to get rid of that experience! It starts to get into the realm of like smart home devices, which is like, instead of just flipping a light switch, I want to articulate the phrase, hello Google, please turn off the living room lights. Because that's easier than just, it's like, no, it doesn't really save much time. I guess I don't have to get up, but it's cool and futuristic, and we used AI to make it happen, so you're gonna use it too. That's kind of how I saw the whole Google Assistant can call people for you. It's like, okay, all right, go for it. That's neat. But on top of that, the reason I'm not too passionate or that interested in this whole Android P development and all the new features they're bringing and all the new software enhancements AI can allow them to do is I think Google still has a much bigger problem that this keynote once again proves they're not really worried about or they're not really focusing on very much. While all of these features are cool, they're not going to be coming to a large number of devices. Android still has this problem year over year, and sometimes it can get a bit better, but for the most part, 50% of Android devices are running Android Lollipop and Marshmallow, which are 3-year-old versions of Android. So even the features you remembered from Android Oreo and Nougat, they're not even the majority of Android. Nougat, to be fair, has become very popular amongst Android devices, but still not even close to being half. And most Android devices are running operating systems from 3 years ago, which means that all these new features, all this AI stuff they love talking about, that's really not coming to the masses. That's coming to the one phone that gets Android P at launch, which is Google's in-house designed Pixel, which misses out on a bunch of features and misses out on the latest CPU that other Android third parties make themselves. Android Oreo, which is nearing a year old now, as of April 16th, 2018, is still only on about 4 to 5% of Android devices. I don't even think most Android phones update to the newest OS. I think just people buy new ones and then they realize, oh, this one has Android O. I guess I'm using Oreo now. So I'm still concerned that that's going to happen with Android P, is that while these features are cool, I think a lot of YouTubers and a lot of people at Google, in fact, misunderstand the idea that all these features are coming to new Android phones, when in reality, they're really not, because a lot of carriers and a lot of smartphones, probably most Android smartphones, are not going to be able to update to Android P for another 6 months or potentially even a year. That does happen sometimes. Meaning that by the time you get these updates, Google's gonna have something else that the Pixel will have, but your Android phone won't be able to get. It's something that I think makes Worldwide Developers Conference a little bit more exciting and a little bit more intriguing because we all feel a bit more a part of it. It's rumored, at least, that anyone all the way back from the iPhone 5S to the iPhone 10, after that June 4th keynote, will be able to update to the iOS 12 beta. And in many countries, iOS outnumbers Android, but overall, globally, yes, I understand that there are more Android phones, but they're not all running latest versions of Android. In fact, most of them are running not 2-year-old, but 3-year-old versions, meaning that Google's not really providing much support to them because that's an older version of Android. It's not a priority. They want to focus on the software and hardware that the new Pixel phone gets. And the Pixels, if you look at the shipment numbers, are just not as high as dozens of other Android smartphone developers. Meaning that Google I/O is really just more about catering to the customers that give Google money directly, as in people who buy the Pixel. I was happy to see that they launched Android P Beta, which was coming to a handful of Android manufacturers. The big one missing, though, was Samsung, which I think is one of the global leaders in smartphone shipments, and they're not getting Android P Beta. But Essential was up there, and I do like Essential and OnePlus. Still lots of very popular ones, but I just mean that I think the main problem with Android is even when you launch all these new features, even when you work on AI so much, it's really not going to affect the mass amount of consumers. Even if Android is running on more devices, more of them are not up to date. And I think it's because Google just made such an open platform and they just let it loose to third parties and say, here, do what you want with it, that Samsung has to put their skin, LG has to put their skin, and carriers have to put their apps on each individual phone. And it makes such a cluttered experience that in the end, Google really just wants you to buy a Pixel anyway. And as we've talked about on this channel a lot, buying a Pixel means compromising in a couple other areas, both in being expensive and missing out on the newest CPU and wireless charging, to where if you go with a Samsung phone, which is much more popular, more people are buying that, then you miss out on the stock Android experience. So again, the primary reason I have a hard time getting excited about Android P is, for one, yes, I am an Apple sheep. I am loving these these types of products and the software I'm getting on them, but at the same time, I know that if I switch to Android, I really don't have this infinite number of choices. If you favor a phone that does this, you pick that one. If you favor a phone that does this, you pick that one. You really can't get the best of both worlds with Android phones, which is why I'm hoping the Pixel 3 will be able to slaughter the competition and just be a really good piece of hardware. But as of right now, I really don't see that happen with the history of the Pixel lineup, just kind of being okay with missing out on things and okay with being outdated. I can kind of predict what the Pixel 3 is going to be like. And I don't think it's going to be the best overall Android phone. It'll be good at several things, and I think AI and machine learning and having that fluid stock Android experience will be a priority, but I'm confident that lots of other Android phone companies are going to outperform it in many other ways that a lot of people will care about. So I think the main issue with Android is that they focused a little bit too much on how powerful AI is, and they just want to make sure that AI is involved in everything they do, whereas the fundamental problem is that not everyone is going to be getting these features, and a lot of people are not switching to Android because of how cluttered that market is, and because of the lack of uniformity. You know, when people buy an iPhone, they know what they're getting into. When you say, I'm going to buy an Android phone, you're saying a lot of different things, and that can be a really good thing or bad thing. It creates a whole ton of confusion, and I think that I/O is more just about giving Pixel buyers what they want and justifying that pretty high price point for a phone with kind of budget specs. But with that being said, I'm still very impressed with what Google's been doing. I'm sure plenty of you have already commented, Siri sucks, Google Assistant's getting so much better. Sure, I don't disagree with that. Siri's not as smart as the Google Assistant. The Google Assistant can literally talk like a person on a phone call. That's kind of creepy, but also kind of awesome. The Google Assistant can answer all these questions. She can take 2 commands and understand both of them. They can roll that out to smart speakers and smartphones, but at the end of the day, if we look at global shipment sales, what phones are selling the best, even though they're not the cheapest, the ones that I think put a primary focus on a uniform experience, a clean UI, and making good, satisfying hardware, those are the ones that's selling. So yes, the top 4 best-selling smartphones of 2018, they all have Siri on them, and yes, Siri sucks, but the majority of the market doesn't matter because they want a phone that's getting updates every year, that has some other hardware it can work with, like a watch and AirPods, and they want to keep using that because they've had a reliable experience with it. It's very impressive what Google's done with their digital assistant, but the numbers are showing it doesn't really change people's minds. If you like the Google Assistant and you like talking to that robot all the time, good for you, but most of the market, they're sticking with someone that puts a primary focus on that app store and the user experience across all their phones, not just a couple. So I'm sure I've upset a lot of you already, so let me know what you think in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.